Bruchim haboyim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Tez Zayin Amud Beis, starting with Daf Tez Zayin Amud Aleph, 2 lines from the bottom. Just to get a running start, the Gemara had presented what seems to be a contradiction between what it says in Masechet Tamid and Masechet Midos. The Gemara resolved the contradiction by explaining that Masechet Midos is authored by Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, and the Masechet Tamid is authored by another author, the Chachamim. And therefore, the Stam Mishnayis Masechet Midos is always Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. The Gemara bolsters this opinion by saying that we find in a Stam Mishnah in Masechet Midos that states that when it comes to all of the walls of the Har HaBayis, they're all very tall, with the exception of the most eastern wall. Why? Because since the Kohen HaSoref, the one who is burning the paraduma, has to do so on the outside of the Makom Mikdash and Har HaMishcha, which is all the way to the east, outside the Makom Mikdash, and he has to do so by sprinkling the blood and facing towards the Makom Mikdash, by even seeing all the way to the Heichal. That's the requirement. In order for him to do that, it has to be the easternmost wall is on the shorter side, so you can peer over it. Why? Since all of the Har HaBayis is situated where there's progression of levels of height, ultimately getting to the Heichal, which is all the way on a higher height. So since it is over 20 amos, in order to then be able to then peer at the Heichal, you have to look over the most eastern wall. And that's therefore the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Because the other opinion, the Chachamim, say that the Heichal is only 19 and a half amos, taller than where the original Har HaBayis, the Karka, is, whereby you can merely, the Kohen HaSoref can merely look through the gateway of the eastern wall, through all of the other gateways of the other walls, straight into the Heichal. So perforce, it must be that the Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Now our Gemara challenges that and says, indeed, this Stam Mishnah could be somebody else, not Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Says Rav Adabar Ava Omar Homani, who's the author of this Mishnah, that states again that the easternmost wall must be shorter than the other walls, in order for the Kohen HaSoref to be able to peer out and see the Heichal by only looking above the height of this wall. It must be Rabbi Yehuda. Why? The Tanya. Rabbi Yehuda says, HaMizbeach memutzav oime be'emtza azara. Since the Mizbeach is in the middle of the Azara, and the Brisa will explain, whereby the Mizbeach itself, it will obstruct the view of the Heichal. The only way to see the Heichal for the Kohen HaSoref is by looking above the easternmost wall and peering to the Heichal. You can never go through and look through the gateway itself, because it will be blocked by the Mizbeach, and the Mizbeach is much taller. Now the Brisa explains the Mizbeach, which is exactly in the middle of Rabbi Yehuda, ushloishim shtaim amos hayuloi. The Mizbeach had 32 amos as its width. That means to say that the side that is towards the Heichal is 32 amos, as the Brisa explains on top of Tezayin Amud Beis. Eser amos keneged pischo shel Heichal. Now the Heichal had a chalal of 20 amos wide. It had then walls on each side that were the thickness of 6 amos. So, including the walls, it was a total of a width of 32 amos. So, es amos keneged pischa shel Heichal, it was 10 amos that corresponded to the, directly according to across from the opening of the Heichal. Yud Aleph Amol Litzofim, Yud Aleph Amol Lidorim. 11 amos to the north, 11 amos to the south. Nimtza Mizbeach mechuvan keneged Heichal v'koisolov. It comes out that the Mizbeach was exactly the 32 amos of its wall, was exactly corresponding to the 32 amos of the Heichal. And therefore, you had the Chalal of the Heichal was 20 amos, that was going into the, exactly corresponding to the middle of the Mizbeach. In other words, the Mizbeach would obstruct anybody from looking straight into the Heichal from afar. The only way you can do that is if you look from above. If you look above that most eastern wall, and then continue peering out above the Mizbeach into the Heichal, that would be possible. So therefore the Gemara wants to show that this indeed, the Stam Mishnah Midos, is Rabbi Yehuda. On that the Gemara asks, V'isal kedaitoch. The Gemara goes on to say that they said, if you're going to say that Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda, Mizbech be'emtza azora mi mishkachas lei. Do we find that the Mizbech is indeed in the middle of the Azora, like Rabbi Yehuda holds? He will find in Maseches Midos that that's not the case, as follows. Ve'hatnan, it says, Kol Azora ha'isa orech meya u'shmoinim v'sheva, al roicha meya v'shloshim v'chamesh. The Azora itself has a length of 187 amos, and it has a width of 135 amos. That is the area of the Azara. The Gemara is now going to then explain both the east to the west as well as the north to the south, these different areas that we just mentioned, and it's going to ultimately explain how the Mizbeach cannot be exactly in the middle, like Rabbi Yehuda maintains, as follows. First, starting with going to the length. Min ha-mizrach lemarav, from east to west, which we're calling the length. Meya u'shmonim v'sheva, it's entirely 187 of the length, from east to west. Mokoim drisas ragli Yisrael yud aleph amma. What we call Ezras Yisrael is yud aleph amma. That's the first part of the Azara. 11 amos. Mokoim drisas ragli hakoyanim. Further west is what we call the Ezras Kohanim, which is yud aleph amma, another 11 amos. Mizbeach shloishim ushtayim. The Mizbeach itself is 32 amos. Bein ha'ulam la Mizbeach esim v'shtayim. Between the ulam and the Mizbeach is another 22 amos. V'ha'heichal kuf amo. The heichal, which includes what we call the ulam, the kodesh, and the kodesh kadoshim, is entirely 100 amos. Now, V'yud aleph amma acharei beis hakaporis. There's 11 amos behind the kodesh hakadoshim. So if we leave it at this, so we make a calculation and we say that all of these amos would be 11 for the Ezras Yisrael, 11 for the Ezras Kohanim, that's 22. Another 32 amos is the Mizbeach, that brings us to 54. Then we have another 22 amos bein the ulam and Mizbeach, which brings us to 76. Plus the 100 amos, which is the heichal, which is 176. And we just mentioned now the 11 amos behind the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is now the entire 187 amos. That's from east to west. Now let's go from south to north. Says the Brisa, or the Mishnah, says, Minadorom listofoin, meya v'shloshim chamish. We said the width, what we're calling from south to north, is 135 amos. The Mishnah explains, Hakevesh v'amizbeach shishim v'shtayim. The ramp and the mizbeach is 62 amos. Now we haven't yet explained, there's a space between the most southern wall of the Azara to the kevesh of the mizbeach. But starting with the kevesh and the mizbeach, it's 62 amos. Mina mizbeach uletabois ches amos. From the mizbeach to the tabois, these are rings that they would put the animal in before they would slaughter it, and that was 8 amos. The mokum hatabois itself is esrim va'arbo, was 24 amos. Mina tabois li shulchonos arbo, there was an area of shulchonos where they would place the animals and they would rinse off the animals. That was 4 amos from the space from the tabos to the shulchanos. Now it doesn't tell us what the spaces of the shulchanos itself was, but that is at least 4 amos. Mina shulchanos linasin arba. The shulchanos to these areas where they actually had hooks to fillet the animal, that was a distance of 4 amos. And again, it doesn't say the nosin, the area that itself was. Mina nosin lekoisel azara ches amos. From there to the koisel of the Azara on the northern side was 8 amos. Now, if we stop over here and we calculate all of the area that we're talking about, we go and we started off by saying that there is from south to north we start off with the 62 amos of the kevish and the mizbeach, plus the 8 amos that we got from there to the tabois, plus the tabois itself, which is 24. We went and he said another 4 amos to the shulchan, and for the shulchan to the nosin another 4 amos, and then finally to the koisel in the front is 8 amos. That brings us to 110 amos. Then if we add another 4 amos with the shulchanas that we hadn't, but wasn't mentioned over here, that gives it to 114. And we said the entire area is 135. So there's a space between the 114 and 135. What's that amount? That's an amount of a total of 21 amos. So what is that made up of? What the Mor says now, V'hamoiser ben hakevesh lakoisel. We said there was a space that begins from the most southern wall of the Azara to the kevesh of the mizbeach. That itself is a space. Umimakom haninosin, and also that place where the hooks take up. Together, these two places add up to 25 amos, which gives us the total of 135 amos, which is we're calling the width of the Azara. Al Kopani, the Gemara says, in conclusion to its question, V'isalke daitach midois Rabbi Yehudi, if you want to suggest that indeed that the stam author of Masechet Midos is Rabbi Yehuda, then mizbeach be'emtza azara mimishkachasle. We don't find that the mizbeach is in the middle of the azara, like he says in the Brisa, because these Mishnayos indicate that it's not exactly in the middle. In fact, it's towards the south. Haruba the mizbeach bedaram koid. Most of that mizbeach is really on the south side. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you would not need to peer over the eastern wall in order to see the heichal, because you wouldn't have to then go over the mizbeach. In fact, you'd have some space to be able to then peer through the gateways into the heichal, because the mizbeach is not completely obscuring the view of the heichal. On top of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, Elolav Shma Mina, Rabbi Lesin ben Yaakov he Shma Mina. Rather, we can deduce, like we said originally, that the Stam Tana that says that the most eastern wall had to be shorter than the other walls, that must be Rabbi Lesin ben Yaakov, because he says that the Heichal is above 20 amos, and in order to then be able to see the Heichal from all the way to the east, so the easternmost wall has to be shorter, so you can peer over it to see the Heichal. Unlike the other opinion that says that the Heichal is only 19.5 amos higher, whereby you can pierce directly through the gateway of the eastern wall, through all the other walls and their gateways, till you see directly to the Heichal. So we have proven indeed that the Stam Mishnah is authored by Rabbi Lesin ben Yaakov.